So this third topic is around HR's image. So the inspiration for this last debate comes from another podcast, and I did that a couple of years ago with Steve Browne, and it's also coming from a suggestion that I got from Arzo. Now, I remember someone shared a post on LinkedIn a couple of years ago when I did the podcast with Steve, and it showed a selection of the first 8 emojis that popped up when they searched for HR. Now, as you may have guessed, they were not necessarily the most smiley types of emojis, and that sparks the question of where does this reputation or image that people seem to have of HR, where does it come from? And Steve and I had an interesting Steve had an interesting take on this when I asked him about it, so I'll share part of what he said here with you. He said, I think many people base their experiences on if something went wrong, and that becomes their framework reference. So if you had a bad interaction with me and I'm your HR person, therefore you go, Steve didn't do this, or HR didn't do this, or I tried to ask him this and it fell short. The other part of it, though, is how HR has positioned itself in companies that were not as accessible or not as approachable or not as able to always be there for people on a regular basis. So if you don't give me your time and attention, I don't care what role you're in, but especially in HR, then there's no surprise that it went negative. Or there's no surprise and it was darker. When I saw this post on LinkedIn, the first thing I thought was, is this how people view HR? Or is it how HR views people? Because when you talk to HR people, they tend to talk about the hard stories and the people who are challenging instead of the people who are amazing. So I think it's earned on both sides of the ledger. How people view us, typically because of their experience with us, or where we tend to focus on the negative more than the positive when it comes to people. So that's in a nutshell what Steve said. Now, of course, this wouldn't be HR debatable if we didn't give it a slightly controversial twist to turn this into a statement for a debate. And so here goes for our final statement. HR's bad reputation reflects how HR professionals view people. I'd like to hear first if you agree with it or not. So I'm going to start with you, Faye. Do you agree or do you not agree? Or is it maybe a yes, but or something in between?
I think this one's probably evoked the strongest reaction from me because I know so many passionate, caring, hardworking HR professionals. This would be a wholehearted no. I strongly disagree with this statement.
Okay, thank you. Also, do you agree or disagree with this one?
Yeah, I disagree with it because the reasons are different, I think. Yeah.
All right. Faye, I'd like to hear from you first then. That was a wholehearted no indeed.
I'm actually quite shocked that someone would say that it's because of the way that HR views people. I think there are, oh my goodness, so many reasons that HR can get a bad reputation and people can have negative perceptions of HR. I think a lot of it comes down to what we were talking about earlier, which is influence. So as far as people within an organization really understanding what is that HR function, therefore, what can you go for support with? What is it that the HR team are actually working on? And so when HR teams are often under-resourced or incredibly busy, it can be really easy to think, I'll just work really hard and do a really good job and try and stay on top of everything, when actually it's really helpful to make sure you're carving out time, not just thinking about how are you influencing that senior person on the board that we talked about earlier, but actually how are you communicating with and influencing the entire workforce? So how are you making sure that they're aware of what the projects are that you're working on? How are you making sure that they can get to know you a little bit as a person, even if there's just one of you and there might be hundreds of them? And this is where it can be really helpful if you've got a strong marketing team who you can go to for support, or if you've got a great internal comms person as well. But these are all skills, again, that aren't really emphasized or talked about, but it just makes the world of difference because there's a lot of mystery around HR still. I'll still have people say to me, if I say that I'm in that world, actually, what is HR? What does it really do? Especially if they might be coming from a smaller organization where there may not be an HR team or an HR person there. So yes, that is one of the things that instantly came to mind when you read that statement out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Faye. I'm going to come back to that. Also, first, let me hear a little bit more from you, please, about this statement.
Yes, so I think most people associate actually HR with recruiting externally. That's been kind of like my finding. A lot of people that don't know HR and don't know what they do, they see that external perception. And I think I would agree with Faye that some of it is to do with the way our roles are scoped out in organization, also communicated. And I think another aspect is around as well, to what degree does HR get associated with positive things, as you said, to the point that you made, Nili, such as, for example, celebrating successes, right? Does HR do that enough, right? For example, one of the things we used to do in a past organization that I used to work for is we used to celebrate the people that had moved internally within the organization or had been promoted and, through support of HR and so forth. And those are kind of some success stories to uplift people, right? And that is kind of just an example of many, many things that can be celebrated, actually. And I think the other thing as well is the internal influence, but also the external influence. So how do you as human resource function, also as leader, build your professional brand within the organization as well as externally? Because, like having a network within as well as externally can have a major impact as well on how employees see you, right? Today's employees are on LinkedIn, so they may see the professionals in-house externally as well on platforms like LinkedIn, and also internally in-house. And that perception can very much be shaped and is within the, let's say, frame of influence that HR has, actually.
Yes, I think some very valid points there as well. Also, thank you very much. So I think what is nice here is that we see how this indeed ties into what we were talking about earlier about the certain types of the certain skills that are important, which indeed we called influencing before. But also, indeed, I think a certain communication, which is linked to influencing, because as Azo also mentioned, we want the people in the organization to know what we are actually doing as an HR function. I think you mentioned it also briefly, Faye, because I think indeed a lot of people, they are not aware of all the initiatives that come from HR. So there's an element of that. So perhaps maybe a final question for both of you, for people who are listening, is if we are not necessarily doing that all that much yet in the company or in the organization, but we would like to get started, what would be an easy way maybe to get started with that? So any words of advice about that? Maybe Arzo, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think first of all, getting an understanding of the perception, like before making assumptions, it could happen through informal channels, chatting with people, or to actually doing surveys as to, how can we position ourselves as a service function, as a service function that basically helps and supports people. So getting an understanding initially, and then like building actions from that. And that can be through internal communications, maybe plugging the gaps of the people, of what people actually expect from HR and what's not being delivered. And I think that's a good starting point, and then building on the strengths of the individual function, because I don't think as well every HR function is the same and every organization is the same. So it really depends on what the internal needs are as well.
Yeah, that obviously makes a lot of sense, because if we want to be optimistic, it might also just be that the perception is great already, and I think that there are for sure companies out there where the perception will be pretty good already. So that's it. That's indeed a very good one. Thank you for that, Azo. Faye, what would you like to add something?
I absolutely love Arzo's suggestions. I think that they're fantastic, and building on that, what she was saying actually about each organization being different, and so the functions within the organizations being different. I think it's the HR function being really clear within each organization what it does represent and what it is there to do, and then being able to communicate that. So right from maybe pre-boarding or onboarding, so when someone joins, they have a really clear understanding of what does actually HR look like? What does it mean to us within this organization? I think that it really can vary. It's tackled differently. You'll both know this. There's, no one model that's agreed on by everybody. As with all different professions, there's such a wide variety in how it's approached. So I think that's a key point as well. And then any surveys that you are doing, like Arzo recommended, you can't communicate enough. Tell everyone, thank you for telling us. So this is what we've done. This is how we're acting on your feedback. This is what we're doing. And those will be skills and ideas that people working within HR will already be familiar with, because you'll already probably be doing some sorts of employee surveys. And that's whenever there's backlash against an employee survey or employee engagement or anything like that, it's because everyone's just got hard at work doing the work, and they're forgetting to put their head up and actually say, yes, we listen to you, and look, this is what we're doing.
Absolutely. And if I may also add to that, with my AI hat on again, is AI is a huge opportunity again to like actually free yourself from the stuff that bogs HR down a lot as well, whether it's like form filling, and I suppose things that are repetitive, right? That can be actually automated so that HR can really come in its full bloom and actually do the things that the function is supposed to do, and that's focus on people and on supporting people.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. I think that is a beautiful ending to this third debate, actually. So before I'm going to slowly wrap up, is there anything that either of you would like to add?
No, I'd just like to say thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant.
Nice.
Here, Neely, so lovely to speak with both of you, and actually such a rich space to debate on. We could probably debate another few hours about it, right? But yeah.
100%. Like I said earlier, I really have to try and stay focused a little bit because there's so many things, so many directions that you can take and questions that I would love to ask. But we have the format where we are trying to stick with that a little bit. So yeah, thank you both so much for joining. And thank you everybody for tuning in as well. If you haven't subscribed yet to the podcast, please do so. Also leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That would help us a lot to grow the audience further. And then I hope to see you very soon again for another episode of HR Debatable. Thank you and goodbye.